That morning, I opened the door and froze. Standing there in a navy blue suit with a fresh layer of lipstick and a leather bag clutched tightly under one arm was Virginia Whitaker, my late husband's mother, my mother-in-law, and the woman who had made it her life's mission to remind me, at every opportunity, that I was nothing without her son. She didn't even wait for me to greet her. "We're going to see the lawyer," she said, brushing past me into the house like she owned it. "I know about the house. The one Miss Delilah left you. Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice was sharp, brisk, and utterly devoid of warmth. I didn't answer right away. My mind stumbled over her words. How did she know? I had only learned about the inheritance the night before. I hadn't told anyone, not even Emily. I followed her slowly into the kitchen, my heart thudding with the kind of dread that felt old and familiar. Virginia was already surveying the space like a general inspecting a battlefield. "You're still buying these cheap groceries," she muttered, peeking into my fridge, then letting it slam shut. "And look at Emily, she's skin and bones. You're feeding her junk. Do you even know what she needs?" 7 years of this. 7 years of watching her parade through my home, making comments, undermining every choice I made. And yet I never stopped her, because I thought Emily needed a grandmother, because I didn't want to create more absence after Matthew died. That was always my reason. But lately, it had started to feel like an excuse. She sat down at the table, smoothing out the pleats of her skirt with a practiced grace. "Well," she snapped, "are we going to sit here all day, or are you going to change into something appropriate? We're seeing the lawyer at 10. I've already cleared my schedule. The lawyer, the inheritance, the apartment in downtown Charleston, the cottage on Edisto Island, and the sum of money I couldn't even wrap my mind around yet. It was real. Delilah Boone had left it all to me. I barely remembered her. My late husband's distant aunt, someone I'd only met a few times at dusty family gatherings years ago. But her letter changed everything. I hadn't slept after reading it. I'd sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the envelope, rereading her words until they burned into my chest. "Don't let anyone make decisions for you, Lauren. Not even when they say it's for your own good. Especially then." I wasn't sure what Delilah had seen in me, or why she'd chosen me over a long list of distant relatives. But for the first time in years, someone believed I was capable. And that belief terrified Virginia. She took out a little notepad from her purse and placed it in front of her like it was a weapon. I made a list of what we need to ask the lawyer. Value of the estate, taxes, investment options. We'll talk to a financial advisor after. We need to plan this properly, Lauren. You can't go into this like a child playing with Monopoly money. I blinked. We. Virginia raised an eyebrow. "Well, of course. You've never handled anything like this before. And let's be honest, you don't have the best track record with responsibility. Just look at this place. You're overwhelmed. It's written all over your face." Something in me tensed. I looked around my small kitchen, the clean dishes drying on the rack, the morning sun filtering through the thin curtains, the empty cereal bowl Emily had left in the sink before school. This was my life. Not glamorous, but mine. Virginia leaned forward. "You're not ready to manage something like this alone. I'll help. I'll take care of it for Emily's sake." For Emily's sake, always those words. She didn't notice the way my fingers curled into fists beneath the table. She didn't see the battle taking shape behind my silence. I had said yes to her control for 7 years. I had let her decide, organize, arrange, approve. I had told myself it was easier, safer, but now, for the first time in so long, I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. And I had a letter in my nightstand that whispered, "You don't have to live this way." I looked at Virginia, her eyes sharp and expectant, her mouth ready to dictate my next move, and I realized I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me again. Not this time. I didn't tell her I'd already seen the lawyer's name in the envelope. I didn't tell her about the way my hands shook when I read Miss Delilah's letter. I didn't tell her anything, because, truthfully, I was still trying to understand it myself. The night before, after Emily had gone to bed, I got the call. A calm, measured voice on the line introduced himself as Mr. Thaddeus Granger, a notary in downtown Charleston. He said, "Miss Delilah Boone named you the sole beneficiary in her will." Just like that. No build-up. No preamble. I thought it was a mistake. Delilah Boone. A woman I'd only met 3 times in my life. Once at Matthew's graduation from college. Once at our wedding. And once more years ago when she visited us unexpectedly and brought Emily a little silver bracelet she was too young to even wear. I hadn't seen or heard from her since. I never even knew she was watching from afar. I remember sitting down at the kitchen table after the call, still in my work clothes, the lights low. I just stared at the wall. The words didn't feel real. An apartment in the historic district, a beachside cottage, and what he referred to only as a significant sum. I didn't ask how much. I couldn't. It felt wrong to talk about money with someone who hadn't even had the decency to die anonymously. No, she had left a letter, handwritten, sealed in a creamy envelope with my name on it in looping cursive. To Lauren with love. From Delilah. I opened it slowly, like it might disappear if I moved too fast. "Dear Lauren, if you're reading this, I've already gone. Don't be sad for me. I've had a long, strange, beautiful life. I chose to leave what I had to you, not out of pity, but because I see something in you I once saw in myself. You are stronger than you believe. But here's what matters more than the money or the house. Don't let anyone decide for you, even if they say they love you. Especially then, you are allowed to live a life that belongs to you." I read it once, twice, and then cried for the first time in months. Delilah Boone, who hadn't seen me in over a decade, somehow knew me better than most. She had seen my silence and recognized it not as peace, but surrender. For 7 years after Matthew died, I had been quiet. I got up at 6:30 every morning, made oatmeal, paid bills, went to work, helped Emily with her homework, listened when Virginia came over with her endless critiques, disguised as concern. "You shouldn't buy name-brand milk. Emily's skirt is too short. You're spoiling her with those running shoes." At first, I was grateful for the help. She watched Emily after school while I worked. She brought casseroles. She helped with the funeral. I thought we were building something that resembled family. But it changed so quickly. Her kindness turned into conditions. Her suggestions became commands. And somehow, I stopped making choices without looking over my shoulder. The worst part, I didn't even notice. Not until Delilah's letter. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed that night, the house silent, only the ticking of the old wall clock keeping me company. I reread the letter again and again, my eyes tracing the same looped handwriting as if searching for a hidden instruction. There was none, just one message, quiet but powerful. "This is your life, Lauren. Start living it." But by morning, reality returned. And reality, in the shape of Virginia Whitaker, was now sitting in my kitchen with her list of financial strategies and an urgent desire to seize control. She didn't ask me how I felt. She didn't ask what I wanted. She assumed, as always, that her way was the only way. I stood at the sink and watched her sip her tea. "More sugar," she muttered, not even asking. I added 2 teaspoons and stirred slowly. My fingers were steady, but my chest was tight. "After we visit the lawyer," she said, "we'll stop by the bank. Then we'll need to schedule an appraisal. The apartment might be worth more than what they quoted. I'll handle the calls. You can focus on keeping things running here." I turned around and looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, but behind them there was something else. Fear, not of me, but of what this inheritance meant. It meant I didn't need her anymore. And she knew it. She smiled, too sweet. "You're lucky to have someone like me guiding you through this." I didn't smile back, because for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be guided at all. The lawyer's office was an old colonial building tucked between restored townhomes on Queen Street. It had white shutters, ivy curling up one side, and a brass nameplate so polished it looked new. I stood on the sidewalk, hands in the pockets of my coat, trying to summon the courage to go in. Beside me, Virginia adjusted her scarf with a practiced snap of her wrist. "We're 5 minutes early," she said. "That's good. Gives us time to go over the questions again." She opened her notepad and began reading aloud, as if I hadn't heard it all 5 times already. First, total value. Second, any pending taxes. Third, estimated time of transfer. And fourth, how we'll manage this responsibly. "I've made a budget outline. You'll thank me later." I didn't answer. My breath fogged in the chilly air. I thought about Delilah's letter again. I hadn't brought it with me, but I could feel its weight in my memory, like it had stitched itself into the lining of my coat. We were shown into a warm paneled office by a young assistant with red glasses and a clipboard. Mr. Thaddeus Granger stood as we entered. He was in his 60s, sharp in a 3-piece suit, silver hair combed neatly back, and eyes that immediately flicked from me to Virginia and back again. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, shaking my hand. "I'm glad you could come. Please have a seat." "I'm her mother-in-law," Virginia inserted quickly. "I'm here to help her navigate all of this. She's never handled anything like it." Mr. Granger gave her a polite nod. "Noted." We sat. He opened a thick folder, adjusted his glasses, and began to speak in a calm, steady voice. "Miss Delilah Boone left a will with very clear stipulations. She named you, Lauren, as her sole legal heir. The estate includes a fully paid townhouse in the historic district, a beach property on Edisto Island, and a financial portfolio currently valued at $3.2 million. The inheritance was prepared in full compliance with South Carolina law. All documents are notarized and pre-cleared." Virginia inhaled sharply. 3.2. Good Lord. Mr. Granger continued. "Delilah Boone also left something else. A personal letter, specifically for you and for your eyes only." He pulled a small, white envelope from the folder and passed it across the table to me. My name was written on it in Delilah's soft, looping hand. Virginia immediately leaned forward. "What does it say?" Mr. Granger shook his head gently. "I'm afraid this is a private letter. Miss Boone made that clear." Virginia's lips thinned, but she said nothing. I slipped the envelope into my purse without opening it. I didn't need to. I already knew what she'd say. Then came the forms, disclaimers, legal documents, signatures. The mood shifted from solemn to mechanical. I signed where instructed. Mr. Granger explained timelines, taxes, estate verification, and 100 other things I'd barely heard. Virginia took notes like she was prepping for a board meeting. Every now and then she'd elbow me slightly and whisper, "Make sure you ask about the utilities," or "Get clarification on capital gains." But I didn't need clarification. I needed space. When we stepped outside again, the afternoon sun had warmed the sidewalk. I felt dizzy, like the world had tilted slightly under my feet. Virginia walked beside me, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. "We'll need to go see the townhouse tomorrow. I want to check the structure, and we'll call a financial advisor. Oh, and you'll need to change the title on the property deed. I'll call my friend at the registry." I stopped walking. "Virginia." She turned, halfway through pulling out her phone. "Yes." "I appreciate that you want to help," I said carefully, choosing each word like it might explode. "But I need to handle this myself." She blinked. "Handle what?" "Lauren, this isn't buying a couch or budgeting groceries. This is serious money. Properties. Investments. This is for Emily's future." "I know," I said, "which is why I need to do it the right way for her and for me." She tilted her head. "You think I don't know what's right?" "I think," I said slowly, You've spent so long deciding what's best for me. You forgot to ask what I actually want." Her face turned pink. "Excuse me." I held her gaze. "I'm not signing over anything. No power of attorney. No shared access. This is mine, Virginia, and I'll manage it on my own." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You think you're ready for this? You've never made a major decision in your life. You think reading a little letter makes you strong." I didn't flinch. No, but surviving 7 years of silence, of biting my tongue while you ran my life, that made me strong. For a moment, the street was quiet except for the wind rustling through the palmetto trees. Then she said it. "If you keep this up, I'll make sure social services hears about it. I'll tell them you're unfit, that you're neglecting Emily for money." I looked at her, and I didn't even feel anger, just clarity. "Then you'd better be ready for what comes next, Virginia," I said quietly, "because you just made this war." That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator through the walls, the occasional creak of the house settling. In the next room, Emily breathed evenly, her sleep untouched by the storm unfolding outside her awareness. I wanted to protect that peace for as long as I could. I replayed Virginia's threat in my head, word for word. "I'll make sure social services hears about it." The word sounded like something from a bad drama, but I knew her, knew how far she'd go. I had seen her manipulate entire family gatherings with a raised eyebrow and a well-timed sigh. I had watched her twist the narrative so smoothly that by the end, people were apologizing to her for things she had done. I knew she wouldn't hesitate to pull the same trick with authorities if it meant regaining control. But this time I wouldn't be silent. The next morning, I got up before the sun. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out the old spiral notebook Virginia had shoved into my hands the day before. The one filled with plans, financial charts, bullet points, and underlined phrases like inheritance use priority, education, housing, trust management. Her initials were everywhere, like she had already signed ownership of my life. I flipped to the first page. Then I slowly, methodically tore it out. And the next. And the next. Page after page. I ripped them clean from the binding. I crumpled them into a ball and dropped them into the trash. The notebook felt lighter in my hands after that. Emptier. Or maybe just finally mine. I grabbed a pen and turned to a blank page. At the top, I wrote in block letters, my plans. Not hers. Not ours. Mine. 1. See the townhouse. Alone. 2. Meet the neighbors. Learn who Delilah trusted. 3. Decide what to do with the beach cottage. 4. Talk to Emily. Honestly. No more shielding. 5. Find a lawyer. I paused after number 5. I didn't have to write more. For once, I didn't need to fill the page with instructions. What mattered was that these were my decisions, not reactions to someone else's pressure. Later that morning, Emily shuffled into the kitchen, her hair tangled, eyes still full of sleep. "Hey," she murmured, yawning. "Did Grandma come back?" I smiled softly and poured her some tea. No, but she might. She sat at the table, stirring her tea quietly. After a moment, she asked, "Mom, are you okay?" I met her gaze. She was only 15, but there were moments when her eyes reminded me of someone far older. Of myself, maybe. Or of someone who had had to grow up too fast. "I'm okay," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. At 10 a.m., the phone rang. I picked it up on the second ring, bracing myself. "Good morning," the voice said. "This is Elena Matthews from the Charleston Department of Family Services. We've received a concern filed about your household. I'd like to schedule a time to talk." There it was. I felt a strange calm settle over me, like something inside had already accepted this moment hours ago. "I understand," I replied. "When do you want to meet?" We arranged a time. 2 days from now. I made a list of documents to prepare. Pay stubs, utility bills, Emily's report cards, her enrollment in school. I would not be caught off guard. Then I called the one person I wasn't sure would answer. Justice and Granger Law. A woman's voice answered. Hi, this is Lauren Whitaker. I saw Mr. Thaddeus Granger yesterday regarding an inheritance. I need to speak with someone about legal protection for myself and my daughter. There was a pause. Let me transfer you. After a few rings, a new voice came on the line. Calm, professional, male. I'm Ian Caldwell. What can I help you with, Ms. Whitaker? And so I told him everything. The inheritance, the threats, the manipulation, the latest call from Child Services. He listened in silence, asking only a few clarifying questions. Then he said, We deal with these types of situations more often than you'd expect. I'll take your case. You'll need documentation. But if your story is accurate, and I believe it is, we can handle this. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. Thank you, I whispered. That night, Emily sat beside me on the couch, her homework open on the coffee table but untouched. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. I overheard you talking to someone. Are we in trouble? I shook my head. No, but someone's trying to cause trouble, and I'm not going to let them. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, Is this because of the house? I nodded slowly. She bit her lip. Grandma's not happy, huh? No, I said gently. She isn't, but that doesn't mean we have to let her make the rules. Emily looked at me for a long time. Are we allowed to say no to family? I smiled, even as something sharp twisted in my chest. Yes, especially when family stops acting like family. She leaned against me and whispered, Then I'm glad you are. We sat like that in silence, the night pressing softly against the windows, and I knew I was ready for whatever came next. 2 days later, at exactly 2 p.m., I walked into the Charleston Department of Family Services with a folder clutched to my chest. Inside were the documents I'd prepared: pay stubs, Emily's school attendance reports, her honor roll certificate, a list of her extracurriculars, dance, piano, the student leadership group, proof of a normal, healthy, present life. The building smelled like paper and cold air. The woman who greeted me was in her 50s, with tired eyes and a no-nonsense voice. Mrs. Whitaker, I'm Elena Matthews. Thank you for coming in. We sat across from each other in a narrow office that felt too bright. She opened a file, flipped through some pages, and said, A report was submitted by a Mrs. Virginia Whitaker. She claims you've become unstable after receiving a large inheritance and are neglecting your daughter as a result. I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly opened my folder and laid out the pages like armor. I told her about our daily routine, about Emily's academic progress, her social life, our dinners together, the stability of our finances. I told her that the inheritance had been received less than a week ago and that, outside of paperwork, nothing in our day-to-day life had changed. I told her the truth, and I told her, delicately, about Virginia. I didn't say she was manipulative. I said she was concerned. I didn't call her controlling. I said she struggled with boundaries. But I made it clear this was not about child welfare. This was about power. Elena listened closely, occasionally jotting things down. We will need to do a home visit, she said finally. Speak with your daughter, possibly a few neighbors. I nodded. That's fine. She offered a small smile. You seem prepared, Mrs. Whitaker. I've had time, I said. That evening, back at home, Emily sat curled on the couch, her schoolbooks scattered in front of her. How was it? It went well, I said. They're going to come talk to you. Just be honest, okay? Okay, she nodded. I will. She hesitated before adding, What if they believe her? I paused. Then I sat beside her and took her hand. Then we show them the truth. Together. The next morning, the second attack came. I was drinking my coffee when the landline rang. One of the few times anyone ever used it anymore. "Hello." A voice I hadn't heard in years answered. "This is Cynthia Whitaker," she said flatly. "Virginia's daughter. My sister-in-law. She lived in Columbia and hadn't visited in over 3 years. I spoke with Mother," she said. "She told me everything. I can't believe what you're doing." I blinked. "What exactly am I doing, Cynthia?" "Cutting her out. Refusing to let her help. Taking that inheritance like it makes you better than the family who supported you." I laughed softly, not out of humor. "Supported me? Virginia controlled me. There's a difference." She huffed. "That's rich coming from you, Lauren. You were barely getting by. Now you think you're too good for help." "I don't need her to manage my life," I said calmly. "That doesn't make me ungrateful. That makes me a grown woman." She scoffed. "Well, just know, you're breaking this family apart." "I think it broke long before I said no," I replied and hung up. The next day, Virginia escalated again. I came home from work to find Emily sitting stiffly at the table. Her cheeks were red, her mouth tight. "Grandma came by," she said. I froze. "What?" "She brought someone. A man. She said it was her friend from church, but I think he was a lawyer. They talked about the will. She tried to ask me questions about you. If you seemed different, if you'd said anything strange." "I didn't say anything, Mom, I promise." I dropped my bag and pulled her into a hug. "It's okay, baby. You did exactly the right thing." I didn't cry in front of her, but I did later in the bathroom with the door locked. Not because I was afraid, not anymore, but because I was tired. Tired of the manipulation, tired of the threats, tired of the way Virginia treated love like a leash. The next morning, I met with Ian Caldwell, my lawyer, at his office. "She's pushing toward contesting the will," I told him. "She's planting doubt, talking about Delilah's state of mind, saying she was old and not thinking clearly." He nodded. "Typical angle. If we can confirm Delilah Boone was of sound mind when the will was drafted, and that you had no undue influence, she has no case." "I have her handwritten letter," I said, "and maybe more. There were neighbors, people Delilah trusted. She wasn't isolated." "Good," Ian said. "We'll need statements and medical records if we can get them." That afternoon, I drove to the townhouse. I hadn't seen it yet, not in daylight, not since I became its legal owner. It stood at the corner of a quiet block in south of Broad, with pale blue shutters and a wrought iron gate. There was ivy climbing the bricks and a mailbox with Delilah's last name still etched in brass. I stepped inside and something shifted in me. The high ceilings, the warm, worn floors, the old books on the shelves, and framed photographs on the mantel. It didn't feel like a stranger's house. It felt like someone had been waiting for me. I walked through the kitchen, into the sitting room, then upstairs into a small sunlit bedroom where a note had been taped to the vanity mirror. In Delilah's handwriting, "Trust yourself, Lauren. You are more capable than they ever let you believe." I smiled. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "I'm ready." The following week blurred by in a haze of appointments and paperwork. I met with neighbors, gathered letters, checked every drawer in Delilah's house. One step at a time, I built my case. The home visit came midweek, calm, efficient, clinical. Ms. Elena Matthews showed up on a Wednesday afternoon with a clipboard and quiet shoes. She spoke with Emily in the living room while I made tea in the kitchen, pretending not to listen, though every word landed like a stone in my chest. When she finally stood to leave, she looked me in the eye. "She's thoughtful, grounded. I don't see anything concerning here, Mrs. Whitaker." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "However," she added, adjusting her coat, "your mother-in-law has been persistent. She's filed an addendum. Claimed you've been isolating Emily, not involving family, possibly out of resentment for your husband's death." I stiffened. "That's not true." She gave me a measured look. "I believe you, but others may not. You need to be prepared if this escalates. It already had. Later that night, I found a letter slipped under my front door. It wasn't in an envelope, just folded paper, creased and sharp-edged. I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was unmistakable, tight, slanted, controlled. You're hurting Emily by cutting us out. You may think you're protecting her, but you're destroying what's left of her family. You'll regret this. I promise you that. No name, but she didn't need to sign it. I didn't sleep. Again, I sat on the balcony long after midnight, watching the breeze lift the Spanish moss from the trees across the street. I thought of Matthew, of how he used to sit in silence beside me, thinking the world into stillness. I missed his quiet steadiness. But more than that, I missed the illusion that his mother couldn't still reach through the walls. By Friday, my lawyer had collected signed statements from two of Delilah's closest neighbors, women in their 70s who confirmed Delilah's clarity of mind and fierce independence. She hated interference, one of them wrote, especially from people who thought money gave them permission to control others. The timing couldn't have been better, because Saturday morning I was served. A man in a windbreaker knocked on my door at 9:13 a.m. I opened it with Emily standing behind me in her socks, holding a bowl of cereal. "Lauren Whitaker?" the man asked. "Yes." "You've been named in a petition to contest the Boone estate. Here are your documents." He handed over a manila envelope and walked away without another word. Emily looked up at me. "Mom." I closed the door, locked it. Then I opened the envelope. Inside, 14 pages of legal intent. Virginia was officially contesting Delilah's will. Her claim? That Delilah had been coerced by me, that I'd taken advantage of a lonely old woman, manipulated her to disinherit blood relatives, and that, as the matriarch of the Whitaker family, she had rightful claim over the estate for the protection and unity of the family line. Unity. She used that word like it meant control. I called Ian. He was calm, even amused. "This is desperation, Lauren. Weak footing. Her claims are emotional, not legal. And we now have 3 signed statements from people who interacted with Delilah regularly. They all say the same thing. She was lucid, independent, and she adored you." I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the letter. What if they don't care about the truth? What if it's just about who yells louder? "It won't be," he said. "Not with this kind of case. We'll fight her on paper. With facts. With her own history of interference. You'd be surprised what kind of pattern someone leaves behind when they've been playing this game too long." A few hours later, I got a call from the private school Emily had applied to the previous month. They were offering her a partial scholarship based on her academic record and extracurriculars. It wasn't the full amount, but with the inheritance, I could cover the difference easily. I wanted to tell someone. I wanted to call Matthew, or even Delilah, but all I could do was smile at Emily as I gave her the news. She threw her arms around me. "We're getting out of here, aren't we?" I nodded. "We are." That evening, I returned to the townhouse. I walked from room to room again, this time more slowly with purpose. I opened the drawers in Delilah's old writing desk, looking for anything she might have left behind. Notes, photographs, evidence of her state of mind. What I found was better. In the bottom drawer, tucked between faded stationery and a yellowed ledger, was a folder. Inside were several letters written to Delilah from Virginia, and they weren't kind. One in particular stood out. Dated 2 years before Delilah's death, it read, "You have no idea what Lauren's really like. She'll use you if you let her. She's always been selfish. She hides it behind that sweet voice and weak posture, but trust me, she's not who you think she is." Delilah had underlined that last sentence and written beside it in firm ink. Maybe I'm the only one who actually sees her. I closed the folder with shaking hands. This was everything. Proof that Virginia had tried to smear me long before the inheritance, and that Delilah hadn't been fooled. Not for a second. For the first time in weeks, I felt something warm build in my chest, not fear, not anger. Resolve. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, not to check my hair, but to remind myself I belonged in that courtroom. Not because I inherited something, but because I survived everything. The hearing was set for 9 a.m. at the Charleston County Probate Court, a sandstone building with ivy creeping up its north side and the weight of 100 years sitting heavy in its halls. I arrived early, dressed in navy blue, my hair pulled back, face bare. I didn't want to look powerful. I wanted to look clear, steady, unshakable. Virginia arrived 15 minutes late. She wore a pearl brooch and a face that looked carved from bone. Tight, pale, brittle. Cynthia flanked her like a political aide, carrying a folder so thick it bent her arm. They didn't look at me when they passed. Emily stayed home as we'd agreed. No child should have to sit through a morning where love was weaponized in front of strangers. Ian met me just outside the courtroom. He gave a small nod and said, "We're ready. You know the judge. Stern but fair. Stick to the truth. Let them dig their own hole." Inside, everything was quiet except for the shuffle of papers and the murmur of formality. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a clipped voice, read the opening statements. Virginia's lawyer, a man named Landon Clay, stood first. He painted a portrait of concern. My client only wishes to ensure that the will of Miss Delilah Boone was not influenced by grief, manipulation, or emotional dependency. We contend that Mrs. Lauren Whitaker, recently widowed, may have cultivated an unbalanced relationship with the deceased in order to secure financial control. I felt my jaw tighten. Ian stood next. Calm, steady, no theatrics. We will demonstrate that not only was Miss Boone entirely of sound mind when she revised her will, but that the claimant, Mrs. Virginia Whitaker, has a documented history of attempting to control and intimidate both the deceased and the primary beneficiary. We have signed statements, medical reports, and personal correspondence that support this. Then it began. They questioned me for over an hour about my relationship with Delilah, when it began, how often I visited, why I was named in her will and not anyone else in the family. I answered truthfully, no embellishments, just the shape of what happened. She invited us over every Thursday, I said. She taught Emily how to play checkers. She told stories about the history of Charleston, the Boone women, how every generation passed something on except the last. She said she was tired of legacy being measured in dollars, that she wanted her house to be a space of healing. Clay scoffed. Sounds poetic. I shrugged. Delilah was. When it was Virginia's turn, she stood like a statue, her voice polished and theatrical. Delilah was lonely, she said. She was vulnerable. And Lauren, well, I don't want to speak ill, but she knows how to seem small. It's a performance. She convinced Delilah she was the only one who cared, when really she just wanted control. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have evidence of coercion? Virginia hesitated. No, but I know her. I've known her for 15 years. Ian stood. Your Honor, we'd like to submit a series of letters, written by Mrs. Whitaker and by Miss Boone herself, detailing the nature of their relationship, and a separate set of letters, written by Mrs. Virginia Whitaker to the deceased, attempting to discredit Lauren long before the will was revised. He handed over the folder, the one with the slanted handwriting, the one with Delilah's own note underlined in ink. Maybe I'm the only one who actually sees her. The judge read in silence. Then she looked up and asked, Mrs. Whitaker, did you ever ask to be included in the will? No, I said. Did you know you were being named as beneficiary? I paused. Not until after her death. Did you expect to inherit anything? No, I said again. Delilah gave us her time, her stories, her kindness. That was more than enough. She nodded. Then she turned to Virginia. You're her daughter-in-law, yes? Yes. And when was the last time you visited Miss Boone before her passing? Virginia's lips parted, then closed. It had been some time. We had a disagreement. The judge raised an eyebrow. I see. Silence stretched across the courtroom. By the time the judge adjourned, the tone in the room had shifted. I could feel it, like a window opening after weeks of suffocation. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Virginia approached me. For the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked tired. Her voice was quiet. "You've made a terrible mistake, Lauren." I tilted my head. "No, I think I finally stopped making them." Her eyes narrowed. "You've turned Emily against me." I smiled. "No, you did that all on your own." She blinked, and for a moment I thought she might slap me. But instead, she turned and walked down the steps, her heels clicking against the stone, echoing like a retreat. Back home, I told Emily everything. We sat at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of cocoa between us. She listened quietly, nodding, asking a few questions. Then she said, "Do we still get to keep the house?" I laughed softly. "Yes, we do. And Grandma—" I hesitated. "We'll set boundaries. Firm ones." She leaned back, arms crossed. "Good. I like the part where we say no." I looked at her, my daughter, brighter than any inheritance. And I knew we'd won more than a court case. We'd won freedom. 2 months later, we moved into the townhouse on Church Street. The probate judge ruled in our favor in less than a week after the hearing, citing overwhelming evidence of intent and clarity in Delilah Boone's will. Virginia never appealed. Maybe she knew she'd already lost more than a legal case. She lost the illusion of control. And maybe, finally, the image she had of herself as the unquestioned matriarch. The first night in the new house was quiet. Too quiet, almost. Emily wandered from room to room in socks, marveling at the old creaky floors and hand-painted tiles in the bathroom. In the kitchen, she opened a drawer and pulled out a set of tarnished silver spoons, holding them up like museum pieces. "Do you think Delilah used these every day?" she asked. I smiled. Probably. She wasn't the kind of woman who saved things for someday. That stuck with me. I started using the silverware too. And the good china. I lit candles in the dining room even when it was just the 2 of us. I stopped saving my life for later. I left my old job 2 weeks after the move. Quietly, gracefully. No speech, no party. I'd been working at the city permit office for 9 years, and while it paid the bills, it had slowly drained me dry. I used a small portion of the inheritance to open something I'd never dared dream about before, a studio. Not a yoga studio. Not a pottery studio, just a place. For writing, for photography, for projects I hadn't named yet. A room with floor-to-ceiling windows and too many plants. A space that felt like breathing. People asked, of course. Neighbors, former coworkers, parents from Emily's new school. "You really live in that Boone place now?" "Yes." "Did she really leave it all to you?" "She did." And then the question always came in one form or another. "Why you?" And I'd always pause, because the truth wasn't easy to put into a single sentence. Delilah left me the house because I listened. Because I stayed. Because when the rest of the world saw an old woman with dusty curtains and a strange family, I saw someone who refused to be invisible. She didn't just leave me a house. She left me permission to stop apologizing, to stop shrinking, to stop waiting for someone to give me space. Emily thrived in her new school. She made friends, joined the drama club, got cast in a small role as a firefly in A Midsummer Night's Dream. I cried watching her flit across the stage in a glittery homemade costume, arms spread like wings. After the show, Virginia was waiting by the exit. I hadn't seen her since the court ruling. She stood near the brick wall, dressed in black, not out of mourning, but performance. "I just wanted to see her," she said. "That's not a crime, is it?" I nodded. "No, but surprising us like this? Not the way." She looked tired, older than she had just 2 months earlier. Her hands clutched a small gift bag with tissue paper sticking out at odd angles. I brought her something. I took it gently. I'll give it to her. She hesitated. I'm not the villain you think I am. No, I said. You're the woman who let fear wear the face of love. She blinked. I didn't flinch. Then I turned and walked away, the gift bag rustling softly in my hand. Back home, Emily opened it and found a charm bracelet with a single letter E and a note that said, "For all the birthdays I missed. Love, Grandma." She looked up at me. I didn't tell her to forgive. I didn't tell her to hate. I just said, "It's your choice." She put the bracelet in a drawer. "Maybe later," she said. And that was enough. Spring came early to Charleston that year. Azaleas bloomed along the fence line. The air smelled like citrus and sunlight. Emily planted herbs on the windowsill and named them things like Queen Basil and Sir Mint-a-Lot. She laughed more, slept better. So did I. One afternoon, as we sipped lemonade on the porch swing, she looked at me and asked, "Do you think Dad would have liked this house?" I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them to the soft sway of magnolia branches overhead. "I think he would have loved seeing us in it," I said. "Safe, free, ourselves." She nodded and leaned her head against my shoulder. And just like that, the house wasn't haunted anymore. It was home. Sometimes the people who try the hardest to control us are the ones who fear losing their version of who we used to be. But growth demands space. Healing requires silence. And real freedom begins the moment we stop asking for permission to be ourselves. Lauren didn't win because she fought harder. She won because she stopped shrinking. Because she chose to protect peace over legacy and truth over tradition. So if you've ever been made to feel small for choosing your own path, remember this. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they share your blood. You get to choose your voice. You get to write your ending. And sometimes saying no more is the most loving thing you'll ever do. Welcome to AITA Stories, where Reddit revenge stories aren't just told, they're lived.